what I am finding, Susan, is that people really come to these churches and find community there. Beyond the entheogenic sacraments, they sit in integration groups and they're finally with a group of people that literally love them for them and just want them to be their authentic, true and authentic self. And I think that's where a lot of the healing is occurring at these places.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Psychedelic Conversations podcast. Let's welcome together Greg Lake back again for the second episode. Thank you so much for being with us, Greg. So amazing to see you.
Thank you, Susan. It's an honor to be back again.
Amazing. So for those of you guys who haven't watched our first episode with Greg, quite a while, last year, I think it was, Greg is an attorney, author of 3 books, and he's also an Entheogenic Church consultant. So there has been so much going on, and we found the need to come back together and talk about what's been emerging since then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of stuff. It's as you're aware, this space, when we talk about entheogen psychedelics, from the research to, like religious groups that I work with, it's just evolving and growing exponentially on a daily basis. And I'm sure you probably see it as well.
Yeah, I am closely watching what's happening in the space of the psychedelic substances. And I mean, Greg, since we talked last time to now, it's almost like a decade fast forward, fast track progress is being monitored. And tell me what you are seeing and what's happening around, especially with the work that you're doing. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so kind of my forte in the space in the U.S. obviously is the religious exemption. The religious exemption, which is a federal law, and some state laws, they work in tandem. That basically allows people who are sincere religious practitioners under certain circumstances to actually consume entheogenic psychedelic sacraments as part of their religious practice. So what I do as a researcher, author, attorney is consult these people on a number of different things, but kind of the main thrust is, what are your beliefs? So let's basically helping them elucidate their beliefs in such a way that, theoretically a court in the United States would look at them on paper and say, okay, this is a religious exercise. And because these people have done X, Y, Z, we find them to be sincere. And so that's kind of my forte here, is helping people do that to, again, what I call enshrining their rights, because, their rights already exist. You can go to court and have the court, directly declare you exempt, right? But it's not required. So I'm helping these people, what we call enshrine their rights under the religious laws. And, I started this work back in probably July 2020. Since then to today, I've helped over 30 groups and counting. It seems that every single week goes by, I get more and more and more calls. And now, admittedly, some people I talk to aren't quite ready yet. It's just kind of preliminary discussions, but many people that come to me are ready to go that day. And so, yeah, it's just growing exponentially. And, people are filling their ceremonies every single weekend. I have some groups that advertise on Facebook, kind of put it way out there in the open, but then I also have people that simply do email lists. And even between those two spectrums, no group is having trouble filling ceremonies, and so it's a blessing. And, what I am finding, Susan, is that people really come to these churches and find community there. Beyond the entheogenic sacraments, they sit in integration groups and they're finally with a group of people that literally love them for them and just want them to be their authentic, true and authentic self. And I think that's where a lot of the healing is occurring at these places.
Yeah, let's focus on the positive sides of these entheogenic churches
Mhm.
first,
Mhm.
because like everything else, we know that there are dark side of these
There are.
communities, right?
Absolutely, there are.
But yeah, let's focus on the positive sides of
Okay.
these churches, right? I love what you said about people come there because of the community
Mhm.
spirit.
Mhm.
Given that the pandemic has shaped our current reality, and I always say, like, I have a really good friend, and we always talk about how things are coming on fast in terms of um, the need for trauma healing, the need
Mhm.
for at least becoming self-aware. Lots of suppressed emotions that are rising. Our reality now has completely shifted and changed. There is no going back.
Mhm.
And there are talks that we have sometimes between my own community where we say it feels like this is the reception before the theater. You go to theater, there's always a little reception. I feel like people, you and I, like people in this space of mental, healing arts, let's call it. I feel like this is just a reception before the theater. I feel like the real hits or real impact we're going to see in the next couple of years, very hard. It's going to be, I know the mental illnesses are now off the charts, and depression off the charts, and people are desperate for, to hold on to a hope to that there is, the uncertainty and the anxiety that they are in right now. So that shows me that, it's no surprise that they are flooding into
Mhm.
those, communities where they offer these sacraments, medicines as a
Mhm.
sacrament.
Mhm.
And I also see, would you say that this growth in, like, this level of proportional growth in your way of work is also determined by the way that substances, the psychedelic substances, are now pushed into the mental health
Mhm.
aspect of it? So, as you know, it's kind of like parallel. There's a huge growth parallel
Mhm.
to this renaissance, and there is this one group of people in the mental health space,
Mhm.
psychotherapists, clinical
Mhm.
psychiatrists, where doctors, they are now opting into using psychedelics as a new tool.
Mhm.
It's growing. People are trying to go on to courses, learn about psychedelic-assisted therapy.
Mhm.
Um, how can they offer this using the mental health outlet?
Mhm.
Now, I feel like your outlet, which is the Entheogenic Church, is also growing in the same level. What would you
Mhm.
say? Because some people are not interested in the mental health
Yeah.
sort of thing. What are your thoughts on that?
So that's a very interesting, kind of observation and question. Yeah, so I think a lot of this is that obviously psychedelics are getting a lot of positive press with FDA trials and things of that nature. And people are seeing this, after having depression for 20 years and being on all kinds of antidepressant medications and saying, wow, this could be my answer. But, not everyone can just go up to the corner and sign up for an FDA trial. Here we go, right? And I think through steady research, they find out that there are groups operating within the United States under the religious exemption where, this is be the most legal way that they can go about, consuming these sacraments. And, in a lot of ways, and let me bring it back to ancient times. We talk about shamans, they were really a medicine man and a religious leader all in one, right? So kind of the West has kind of separated those two, but we're kind of coming back together. And I say that because a lot of people I work with are doctors, psychotherapists that have had religious experiences on these medicines, and believe that they have religious type beliefs in them, and now they want to actually open their own church or organization and serve medicine. And so I see that now. I do get some of the types from the medical community that don't have religious views as it relates to the medicine. Again, when I say that, I really mean like metaphysical type views or beliefs as it relates to these substances. And unfortunately, I have to turn those people away. I'm not going to help someone who isn't actually religious as it relates to them. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but yeah, I do see a lot of overlap with medical professionals actually coming and opening their own church, right, to serve these substances. And it's just the most thing I get is they say, look, we've been trying to treat these things for forever. And now we finally come across something that's gaining traction that we've personally had experience with, that we've personally seen help people. And it's just that inextricable pull. I mean, if you get into medicine for truly to help people, when you come across something like this that seems to be so effective as it's playing out in the research and everything, I mean, I get it and I understand, and I'm here to help people like that, because a lot of this is also safety. So, theoretically, and not that it's only doctors that are safe or whatever, but, theoretically, they would be some of the safer people to administer these substances. So I'm obviously here to help them.
Yeah, I love your insights on that. Obviously, I'm coming from the medical, mental health approach into this, but doesn't mean that I don't have the metaphysical connection or the because when people get a bit sensitive when you say religious, right?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, when you say entheogenic church, they just kind of, no, not for me, thank you very much. So I'd rather go to a clinic where the medicine is administered through a doctor who's qualified to and knows about pharmacology. So I will trust them, and I don't want to have any association with the religious aspect of it. How do you see that as well?
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. People do. And, here's the thing is that, when we say religious, it's just a term placed on a descriptor for a set of views, right? It's unfortunate that over the years, and I'm going to say, a lot of established religions have kind of bastardized the name religion with some of the stuff that they've done. And it's not all of them. It's not all churches, but we know that there's been some things that organized religion have done or done in the name of organized religion that kind of turn people off. And I totally get it. I work with people that are like, do we have to put church in our name? No, you don't. You don't have to put church in your name, and so I would say that. And one thing I say to people too, and this triggers some people, but it's like this, like, don't let what someone else has done or did define for you a term, right? You know what I mean? Like define religion for yourself. I mean, because from what I've seen with a lot of people I work with, these places are good places. It's like where there's real fellowship and people are really there to support and love one another, like I said, for exactly who they are. And if that's my definition of religion, right? And those are the people that I like to help. But I totally get it. People are turned off, and hopefully one day maybe they'll change their mind. But look, it's not everyone's cup of tea. I realize that there's a whole contingency and population of people, like you said, that will only feel safe and secure with a doctor, whereas, I'll just say me personally, I've sat with people who've actually like done the medicine a lot, right? And that's who I feel more secure with, people who've really built a relationship with these sacraments. But hey, it's whoever's cup of tea. My hope is that in the future, everyone will be able to go where they feel safe and secure to engage with these substances, right?
I love that approach, having that diversity, having choices. Because everybody is individual, we carry biases within our unconscious, towards what it means to, what does religion mean? What does church represent? And also like doctors, some people would say, like, there are people also from the spiritual or the functional medicine or the, Ayurvedic or Chinese medicine, they are completely against these white-collared, white coat doctors. They don't trust them either. So much diversity out in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, just recently through publishing my third book, I ended up having some blood pressure problems, right? And I was kind of one of those people, I can just eat healthy and do this and exercise, and I'll never have to go back to another doctor. But I tell you, when my blood pressure got out of control, I gladly went to my family practitioner, right? And was fortunate to put on some medication to help me get my blood pressure under control. So, but yeah, I know a lot of people, just like you say, that they're very distrustful of it. And, there's arguments on both sides of that, but I would say never, in my opinion, I'll never get too far extreme on one end or the other, because you never know when the day comes when you might need one of those two ends,
Yeah. And there's this, I was listening to Richard Tarnas's lecture not long ago. I love what he said. He said, the problem is not that we should have this view or that view. It's about when you go too far to the end, like when you are so convicted, and there is a really narrow mind that goes along with what you believe and your conviction that this is the only way and that's it. That's the danger. He said that's actually can be quite catastrophic.
I agree.
Yeah, we're seeing this a lot, aren't we? We're seeing this in the psychedelic Renaissance space, and we're seeing people coming from all angles. And I feel like, Greg, there is what is really needed. What I see is that the self-awareness piece, of not just like to function better in the world, but also realization of like, what do I carry in my unconscious or my subconscious? What are my biases? Why do I get that reaction when I see a white coat guy and doctor label, and why do I get reaction when I read the entheogenic, like the church, the word church? Like, what is it in my unconscious bias that's making me react? Because ideally what we want to come to is like dissolve all these convicted and biases, and come to an understanding that the world is so diverse individually. We're so diverse in every way possible, and how can one thing could be good for everybody? That's impossible. That's right. I think eventually what I'd like to see is that an emerging understanding collectively, that realization of let people have a choice, let people decide, and in the process, can we build self-agency? Can we build that inner trust to know what could be good for ourselves without judging, criticizing, and taking a one side, extreme one side, right? So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. And just speaking from personal experience, kind of working with these medicines, these sacraments, it's about shedding what we call mind programs, where it's like, I feel a certain way about something, but then you got to kind of sit back and say, well, why do I feel that way about it? Right. And a lot of times it's not because of any personal experience of ours. It's because it's kind of, through our culture, specific cultures and where we grew up and our family kind of input these things into our head. And it's like you said, we have this bias that we're not even necessarily conscious of. So, with me working through the medicine, there's just been a whole array, and it's every single day. I'm thinking, I feel this way, but like, is that right? Like, is that necessarily how I feel per se? And it that itself is very healing, to just kind of get back to that place of neutrality and acceptance, again, that we're all diverse and that people might like this, might like that, but it doesn't make them bad or good, right? It's just what people prefer. And I'll say this, I haven't owned a TV in almost 9 years. I haven't watched the news, any of it, and I've noticed that people who watch a lot of the news end up very highly polarized to one end or the other. And I mean, I'm not going to say that's the only thing, but I think a lot of the main media outlets are kind of, I don't know if say purposefully orchestrating, but they definitely have a part in polarizing people to these different ends of the spectrum. And I've noticed that people who kind of take a step back from politics, end up coming more around and being more fair and middle-minded, I would say.
That's so beautiful. I don't have TV either. I sold mine 7 years ago. Like similar to you. It's interesting what you said about that. It's true. Obviously coming from a therapeutic background and also offering the therapy and working with these people, you're right. People who have been glued to TV in this last 2 years to just be on top of and be informed about what's happening in the world are right now so rigid. I find that too. It's actually very difficult to even speak certain things without them reacting. So I understand that. I get it. It's very powerful way of creating, or programming people. So I'm with you on that one. Yeah. This is why I'm super interested and passionate about the self-agency piece. So you demonstrated that by saying like you don't have it for 9 years. I hope more of us can say that.
Yeah, and look, I'm not knocking anyone who goes home and watches, Netflix all night, right? But one thing I've noticed is that people, we live in this society where it's constantly you need this, and a lot of that's fed through the TV. You need this, right? And people like will come home from their 9 to 5 job and sit on the couch and watch Netflix for 5 or 6 hours, right? And be like, man, I wish I could acquire that or need that, right? But like the whole fact that they're sitting there with their extra time is defeating that whole thing where, and I had to break out of that, 2 or 3 years ago before I started publishing books and doing this work, it was just 9 to 5 done. I wasn't watching TV, but I wasn't really using my extra energy to channel anything creative or productive. Right. But once I did that, I mean, my life completely changed. I ended up having like extra income streams and getting involved in all kinds of cool projects. We live in the digital age with, the social media and stuff to where you can find people doing just about any kind of thing that interests you. And I encourage people, I work with a lot of addicts, to don't waste your creative energy, just sitting there doing, I mean, if you do, that's you, but try to find an outlet for that, because you'll find that it's really therapeutic in and of itself to kind of take that energy and be productive with it.
See, from a somatic experiencing perspective, there is the philosophy of the somatic experiencing perspective, well, somatic healing, let's call it, is that you need to, in order to break out from your usual habits or your own usual familiar, or unhook from your familiar reality, there has to be a level of capacity within you. Like there is no change, transformation, nothing can happen until you build enough inner capacity, and that's very closely tied to the self-agency. The more we build that inner capacity, there is a more self-agency in discerning what to watch, what to eat, who to, and my idea of like having that self-agency is the one thing that makes us unshakable. So we become completely independent of what's happening. Whoever is trying to make us feel lack of, or you are not worthy of this and you have to do more learning. Recently, I did a post. Actually, it was really well received. Information is what's blocking the freedom, because we are so addicted to information. And I think if we do this mindlessly, this is where the problem is. And you're talking about the same thing. If you're going to be spending all of your spare time doing things that's going to feed the lack, then where is the time to create something that could build the capacity within you, right? That's the question here. I feel like, when people say, I am a treatment resistant, I'm a treatment resistant, I have all these issues about treatment resistance. And I'm thinking, wow, well, because you haven't spent your time in the right places building that capacity. Because, a lot of people who go through treatment resistant path of trying everything, it's because they've just been led by the other, someone else giving their inner knowing or inner trust or inner ability to think and decide for themselves in the hands of the other, and they're continually being passed on here and there and try this and try that. Yet the only thing they need to do is just come back in. Right. And this is what's really missing in those when people say, I tried everything, nothing's working. And yet that seems to be the missing piece of not having the self-agency, which, like you said, the external society, the environment is not allowing us to tap into that self-agency, right?
Yeah, we're all very infinitely powerful beings. I believe that. And, a lot of the way that society's set up, society, it's not very conducive to people really tapping into the inner and realizing that, I said this on a post last night on a comment. I said, I can't isn't part of my vocabulary. I would never speak self-defeating words like that, right? That doesn't mean that I try to do absolutely everything, but if I get my mind going in that direction and it gets so far, then I can't, it's over with, I'm going to go. And what I found is that really I'm a man of many different talents, I guess you'd say. Like I do all these different projects, and I've had people tell me, oh, well, you can't, you can only be good at one thing. You can't do all this thing. My response is that I would never speak anything like that into existence, and it's worked out for me so far. But yeah, it's that self-doubt, the lack, it's just imprinted in the minds of people just through living in this world, and it's sad. And hopefully through these therapies and all these, and the thing is that it's not just psychedelics. There's all kinds of modalities that are popping up now that people are getting healing from, and a lot of them run ancillary to like these entheogenic churches. They offer all kinds of other offerings outside of just sitting in ceremony and breath work, all this stuff, and it's all coming together, I think, to really make an impact on people, and ultimately, like you say, sometimes when I wake up and I'll be thinking, what kind of impact am I having on the world, and to be honest with you, it's not something I can even start to comprehend or calculate. I can say this, that there's well over 1,000 people every week in this country that consume an entheogenic psychedelic sacrament because of work that I've done. And so how that ripples out through the collective, remains to be seen. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And there's a quote that I like, Greg, and it says, psychedelics are a way to break this world rather than be confined in it.
Yeah? Yes, I agree.
I feel like the people who are drawn to the substances are definitely the ones that really kind of fed up with the confinement, like the way that we've been confining to this sort of boxed up reality that we live in. And I think, like you said, thousands of people taking these sacraments, psychedelic sacraments every weekend. It just goes to show like where we are on this right now, what's happening also, and how much do we need that change, whether we know it or not consciously, whether we actively seek it. There is some big collective kind of, it's pulling us there.
Yeah,
it's happening. And globally, like you're in the US, I'm in the UK, and so many people I speak to in Europe and other countries, we all kind of synchronized in what's happening, right?
It's funny, I went to, I guess, Europe for the first time. I went to Serbia last May, which included a little excursion into Bulgaria, but there's tons of groups in those countries drinking ayahuasca regularly, consuming sacred mushrooms. It's a global thing, and people in some of these countries, right, the penalties for this stuff is pretty harsh, and they're still doing it and being fairly open about it. But it's just it's a global thing. And you're talking about people called to these sacraments. I absolutely believe that there are a huge contingency of people that are actually called to them, right? To where, when they come across this information, they already know that their next best move is to go and meet these sacraments where they're at. And, in my new book, I talk about an article that a guy named Michael Winkelman from Arizona State wrote. He's an anthropologist and an archaeologist. He basically found evidence that the sacramental consumption of what we call entheogens, substances that awaken the divine within, occurred in all major areas of the world in antiquity. And so my belief is that encoded in a lot of our DNA through our ancestors is the calling to these types of sacraments, right? And nowadays it could be in the medical or it could be in the spiritual of these churches, right? But I think that there's in our DNA some type of code there that when we see this, we're like, oh yeah, that's where we need to go, right? Because of the history of our ancestors. Just my belief.
Yeah, let's talk about your last book.
Yeah.
Because I saw little glimpses of posts that you've been doing about really researching into the ancient world of the sacraments and ancient world of the practices. There was one especially where you talked about women were quite kind of and frontier leading the healing circles. So I would like to hear more about that.
Yeah,
and your book, what's the name of your book?
So the name of my new book is The Law of Entheogenic Churches. It's volume 2. Volume 1 was kind of foundational text of the law in the US. This volume 2, and then it's the definition of religion under the First Amendment. And it's kind of a deep dive into How has the definition of religion under the First Amendment to our Constitution evolved over time? Where is it at now? What does this history that they're slowly uncovering, right? What does that mean in terms of defining religion? And then beyond that, what does the research and the science of the primary religious mystical experience effectuated through the consumption of these sacraments, what does that mean in terms of defining a religion? And then ultimately these run-of-the-mill, and I don't mean that in any condescending way, but like the run-of-the-mill Entheogenic Church belief structure in the US and I'm sure abroad, what does that mean in terms of defining religion? Is that religious? So those are kind of the things that I examined through the book. And the reason why I did it is because there's a church here in Florida called Soul Quest, and they've been operating way above ground for, I think, since 2017, maybe before. And they're actually in a litigation with the DEA. And the DEA wrote a letter that was in the court record, basically doubting whether Soul Quest was even a religion or not, right? Because in the US, when groups are like, so we have the Santo Daime and UDV have been declared by the courts to be exempt, right? Well, they're connected with mother churches back in Brazil who have, over 100 years history. Well, the government didn't even controvert whether that was a religion or not. But Soul Quest, that's not tied to any specific lineage or church, they're starting to doubt whether, trying to doubt whether it's a religion or not. So, I saw this coming to the forefront that a lot of these churches that aren't connected to these will need some support in trying to show that indeed it is a religious exercise. And so that was kind of the why behind my book. But yeah, real quick on the women, leading this thing. I mean, so yeah, in that Winkleman article, the same one that I talk about in chapter 2 of my book, he talks about the history that they found a lot of evidence that women led these rituals, these shamanic practices in ancient times. And, what I see doing the church work, over half of the people who engage me are women. And not all of them actually serve the sacrament, but as far as like coordinating the church and getting everybody together and making it a community and making sure everyone's taken care of during their time at these ceremonies is unmatched from what I see. And in fact, I tell you, me personally, I favor to go to ceremonies where at least it's organized by women, because they're just so well put together, and that feminine energy kind of controls and keeps everybody in harmony and in a group, I found.
That's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So what other things you covering on your last book? We will definitely share the link with our guests.
Yeah. So and I think the most, my favorite part of it was taking the research, taking in articles that Stanislav Grof had written about, from the first time he started administering LSD, he realized real quick that like people were having full-on religious experiences, no different than the ones underlying most of the major holy texts that we know. And so, yeah, and as a matter of fact, his belief is that actually these are religious sacraments, that these should be like sacraments best used in ceremony. And just taking all that information about, because really the research and the science buttresses, again, this religious exemption for people, right? Because it's pretty reliable when these substances are administered in certain controlled settings, which the ancients knew, like the ayahuasca shamans in South America, they know how to construct a ceremony in order for you to have that type of breakthrough mystical experience, right? And so do Stanislav Grof and them. They knew the same thing, how to do it in a therapeutic setting, but it's like, controlled environment effectuate these types of experiences. And so my argument is that if we have a group and we have some metaphysical beliefs as it relates to these sacraments, and we're gathering together with the primary intention of effectuating that type of experience, and we're doing it safely and all these other, all things being equal, that's a protected activity.
That's amazing. I just wanted to touch on this group or collective activity of coming together. I listened to Rick Doblin saying that they're going to launch their first group psilocybin study. It's going to be in a group setting. And then if you talk about the churches, it's about the community coming together. So the sacrament is not actually the center. It's not the center of the thing. It's the community essence is in the center of what this is. and then we have the sacrament.
Yep.
Right? It should be that way. It's not really about sacrament is in the center point and everything revolves around that. But no, because human beings, they thrive when they come together.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And we know this from the indigenous practices. If you look at all of the esoteric and indigenous philosophy, look what they're doing. They are always coming together at birth, at death, festivals, special days, planetary or not, all these unique times of the year they get together. There is this community essence that is protected, right? And I think as in, growing up in the Western world and knowing more about the modern world, I think we definitely need to come together more. That's the learning, I say.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, we are more powerful together than we are individually. And, we see a lot of divisiveness back to the news and popular media, there's a lot of divisiveness, right? But when we come together as communities, as people, as groups, that's really where our power is at, energy. And I felt it in ceremonies before, that like the energy of the group would get very, very high, and like it's this amazing, almost ecstatic experience, just the energy in the group. And again, when we're talking about healing modalities and groups and ceremonies and stuff, it's it's the feeling that you're not alone, that you're struggling. Well, there's all these other people that are struggling, and then we come together to try to help each other through sharing our experience, strength, and hope, integration, stuff like that. That's really where a lot of the healing occurs, right? It's kind of, the sacraments or the psychedelics allow you to kind of open up and see kind of where your problem areas are and learn to accept them, but really integrating that into your life, with a group or with a one-on-one with another human being is really where the healing occurs. And I wanted to say one thing real quick, that a point that I make is that, and so a lot of this definition of religion is by analogy. Okay, so a lot of the things we look at to define a religion are based upon things that we know from other older established religions. So, and I say this in terms of an integration specialist. So, and my conclusion is that integration people that work for and with these churches are really the pastors of the church. And why is that? Well, they're basically, when you go to, and this is just an example, a Christian church, the preacher reads a 2,000-year-old primary religious experience to you and puts his 7th millionth interpretation on it to make sense to your life, to help you. Well, on this end, we have people having their own primary religious mystical experience, and these integration people are working with them to help make their own experience make sense to them, right? So there's some analogs there, and I just say that because I think that would be a good point to make in a court, to a judge, in defense of these practices as being religious in nature, as that's defined in law, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that as well. Yeah, there is definitely beauty and power in the group processes. I mean, if you look at the therapy work, every individual who goes the path of psychology, studying psychology or therapy, they need to have their own group work. They need to go through that group processes. It's in everywhere. It's weaved in everything. It's in the fabric of life. There's something very unique about human beings, that they work best together. And even with meditation, like you said, there are many other tools. It doesn't have to be psychedelic substances. There are breathwork workshops, there are yoga, meditation. And looking back, I mean, even going back to the mystics of our time, like Rumi, he had his own community where they used to get together and fast together, meditate together, and maybe just stay in silence together, just offering each other the presence of their silence presence, and there is definitely a power. And coming back to the somatic healing perspective, guess what? A nervous system, in order to heal, it needs another nervous system. There's no surprise there. And that's why in group processes, when people come in together, and if the container is super safe, guess what? The nervous system, with their little neuroceptions, they feel it out. And then as soon as the nervous system feels safe, guess what? The person now open for change,
Yep.
open to share, open to be vulnerable, open to, whatever that is needed for their transformation. So highly, highly valued group processes.
I was an addict for 17 years, and I actually went through a treatment center that was 32 months long, and we had group therapy twice a week, right? And just the insights that were gained in those groups, you would go to the group and start processing, and someone you never expected would be like, oh yeah, I've been through that too. Here's how I felt. Here's what I did. And it just like, bam, it clicks a light on. And you just never know where that's going to come from. Right. And that's why I tell a lot of people, like, when you're going through the world, like, remain teachable, right? You know what I mean? You'll never know where the best advice or something that really resonates to you is going to come from. It might come from a child. You never know, but you got to keep that open mind and open heart. And it's the same in the group. You get in a group, once you start feeling secure with a certain group of people, that's where people start to open up, and those channels come in, and that's where a lot of healing can occur. I mean, it did for me, for sure.
Yeah. And this is even Stan Grof always talks about, the indigenous people always staying together, always doing things together. Like I said earlier, the being there together at death and birth. I think it's so important. And I feel like we are becoming more open to that now, from the modern world. And just another thing I wanted to kind of open up to is, so how do we now? We kind of I feel like we're in a good space establishing and understanding what is a psychedelic sacrament, how can it be used in group healing, and also, the Renaissance is, the process is incredible. Like the progress that we are seeing, all this is happening, amazing, and it's all well. But how do we now address the recreational part that we carried for so long in the modern world? Do you see, what are your thoughts on the?
So you're saying, like, with like the thought that these are used recreationally, how do we deal with that? Yeah, so that's great. And I address it in my book too. Once I started digging on the history of this thing, really, to be honest with you, the sacramental, religious, spiritual, shamanic use of these substances has occurred farther than we probably know. And that was the norm. That was the norm, the main way these substances were used up until, then we come into like the 50s and 60s, early 60s, where we started doing research in the scientific realm, right? And then magically in the late 60s, here we go with recreational use, and now we need to ban these things. They're terrible. So like when we look back over history, it's the absolute minority of use of these things. And moreover, just because someone has been labeled to use it recreationally, does that not mean that they were still open and possibly had a religious or mystical experience that helped change their life, right? I mean, the hippies in the 60s, yeah, they were at Woodstock eating it and stuff, but who's to say they weren't, again, in a group having religious experiences, on these substances, right? And so, yeah, I think we just need to kind of reframe it and just inform people, like, look, this idea of recreational use is really a pretty modern phenomena and isn't consistent with the history of the use of these things, right? Because, and then like on the medical part, again, shamans are also medicine men too, right? So they would use these in a medical and religious setting. And I don't think in this space that those things are as far apart as Western thought has placed them, over time. But yeah, I think it's just reframing it. And I tell you, for me, once I, read the history and the archaeological evidence, it really like clicked with me. I'm like, wow, because I used to think, oh, well, the work I'm doing is influencing the future of religion. But the more I look at it, it's just a continuation of everything that always has been. And in my view, probably always will be. And it's my belief that these substances were placed here that have been discovered. Even Albert Hoffman said in an article in a book that I have that he believed that it was a divine revelation for him to discover LSD on that fateful day when he did, that these substances were placed here for that reason, for us to, come to these rules and to effectuate mental and sometimes physical healing through them, right? And I think it's just shifting that perspective of people, of letting them know that, like, look, this recreational thing is, I'm not saying it was invented or anything like that, but it's really the minority of use when we look back over time and really looking forward into the future.
Oh my God, this is so great. Thanks for clarifying that and holding that view, because that's been my view also. That really helps. The recreational use is the minority practice. It's a practice for the minority that emerged from the 50s, 60s. I guess when they were faced with, the legalization, the legal landscape changed overnight, and then I'm guessing it just kind of, it's kind of found its way into the recreational way of using, I guess. But I like what you said, like the sacramental use and with respect and in more like intentional use is actually the continuation of the historical use, right?
Yeah, and one thing, when we look back at when all these drug laws came into effect, well, particularly in the U.S., which it was admitted by Nixon's people eventually that these were racist and anti-leftist laws, right? But we're in the middle of the Vietnam War, and I think the powers that be saw that these substances, probably through effectuating these mystical experiences, like completely reordered people's valuing, right? That they grew up in this neighborhood or with these normal social mores and values, but like these substances completely wiped it off, put them in a whole different spectrum. And I think that scared them. And they said, wow, like we can't have this. We have a war going. We need people not to be draft dodging and trying to escape, what they probably felt their duty was to fight this war. And then that just kind of stuck after that, right? And then we started funding worldwide this drug war machine that probably employed tons of people and lots of money being pumped into it. And it just kind of took on a life of its own. But I think now, really through the psychedelics and the traction they're getting, I think it's really having people think about drug laws generally, and how smart they are, and whether it's actually something that we could ever even combat, which I don't think we could. Ultimately, my goal in all this is that one day we'll be able to basically put whatever substance we feel in our own bodies, right? And alter our conscience in any way that we see fit, to the point that we don't hurt other people. But we're probably still far a ways off, but really, as it relates to psychedelics, my goal is ultimate legalization. I tell my clients all the time, I hope in 5 years, these discussions of the nuances of the religious exemption are moot. I really do. I hope that the advice I'm giving right now becomes obsolete, because it doesn't matter one way or another, whether this is completely religious or medical or whatever.
Yeah. Sounds good. And one thing I wanted to discuss here with you is that, coming again from a therapeutic background and working with early trauma, and like Stan Grof, he did an incredible work with the perinatal trauma, the understanding of that, how it's impacting and affecting our, life later stages of our lives. And, what I want to say is that, we see people who can recreationally use LSD or other MDMA or other kind of substances, and continually trip, like they are hooked. And I think there was one post I read, somebody taking 4 tabs of LSD. I was thinking, wow, that's a lot. So imagine the capacity they must have built, or the tolerance they have built to take such amount of these substance and still be okay and continually going back. And then on the other hand, we have people who say, I've only done LSD once, I will never touch it again, because they received exactly what they need to receive. And I kind of wanted to tie this with the substances, psychedelic substances being the non-specific amplifiers, meaning, would you say that if we go into it for tripping, for clubbing reasons, for partying, or escaping, let's say, because we need to also address that psychedelic substances are used to escape, which a lot of people say, no, that's not true, because you cannot use them to escape, because eventually they will punish you. Eventually there will be some consequences for doing it. And yet I'm still seeing they're probably, again, in the minority, probably very minority, but I still see a lot of people continually using them to escape, especially LSD and MDMA. Not so much ayahuasca, because I know it's a different game, right? I was going to say, not all the mushrooms. I do know some people are still tripping on mushrooms to escape. So what would you say on that one?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's to me, it's all about intention, right? And here's what I've noticed through my years of working with them and being in this space is that the experience is really determined about where your heart and mind are at the time you consume them. And when I say that, I mean people who consider, for instance, the mushrooms to be sacred and respect them. And like I tell people, like I have a mutual respect with the mushroom, right? We respect each other. You know, every experience I have is just completely earth shattering and like, just beautiful mystical experience, right? Where it's just amazing, and but I don't turn around 2 weeks later and sit in another ceremony, right? It's several months or maybe half a year later before I feel like, okay, well, some of this stuff has kind of been dull. So I go back, right? But yeah, there's people that absolutely use these substances to escape, or to have a good time, to go to a music show or whatever, which is fine. But and again, I'll say, I think a lot of the people, for instance, and I think I saw a study not too long ago where it said that basically people taking MDMA at a music festival are having like a quasi-religious experience with this intense connection with the crowd, right? And so I think a lot of people are having these experiences and just don't have a label for it because they haven't really done any reading or research to know that this is a common thing. But people escaping it and people having bad experiences and still going back, just because someone has a bad experience where it punishes them doesn't mean that those people afterwards take that seriously and take time to reflect on those things, right? Because that's really where the healing and doing better in your life occurs, is when you sit back and reflect on it, right? But you have a bad experience that scares you for a month and then you're right back to it, but have not had any second thought as to that first experience. Again, it's just escape and it's just for fun. And look, I'm not here to tell anybody what to do with themselves or their bodies, or if that's what's fun to them, that's fine. But I tend to think that over time it starts to become extremely unhealthy to go on like that.
I feel like what you just said applies to the therapy work.
Yep.
You meet people who are in therapy for 10 years. They just go for the experience of sitting with a therapist or having that connection. So what's underneath the experience or the practice of doing that is the need for connection. And
Yep.
and now we know clearly that psychedelic substances they initiate us into that healing. They're very kind of connected to. I cannot imagine a psychedelic experience without the element of trauma healing, or at least healing of some suppressed emotion, or releasing or bringing some resolution to a negative memory, right?
Well,
I just cannot imagine psychedelic substances just to, like you said, and maybe those people who are continually going back, they are maybe unconsciously kind of finding or meeting the need for connection, like coming to a church, entheogenic church environment, maybe is helping them meet their needs in connecting with the other if they are lonely. Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people that go to these churches who were largely recreational users, and then they actually like sit down and take it seriously one time in a ceremony, and they convert. They say, no, I've been using them wrong. I was abusing them. But like now I realize that it's this really highly structured, carefully attuned environment is really where all this occurs. And for me, there are periodically I have experiences where there's traumas I forgot or things like that come up. But for me, a lot of it is really future guidance and eliminating self-doubt. There's not like these terrifying moments, but it's just this grand vision of love and that I can do anything I put my mind to, that really kind of like keeps me going. But yeah, for me, it is my religious practice. I don't, I only consume sacraments like in a highly structured ceremony, pre-planned. A lot of times I actually fast for a day or two before it, just to kind of get my mind prepared to get in that zone and do work and be prepared. When I was in my youth, I did haphazard just eat psychedelics periodically, and luckily I never had just a terrible experience. But it didn't take me long into my 20s to have that first mystical experience and say, whoa, this is of a different nature. And that's when I really started to build a relationship. Mushrooms are my main sacrament that I'm closest to. And I actually built a relationship with it. You know what I mean? Like we have a relationship. And admittedly, a lot of that was growing my sacrament, which I recommend. Like if you really are interested in this, to grow your own sacrament takes on a whole different character of this whole thing. It's amazing. And so I encourage, like a lot of the churches I work with, grow your own sacrament, because then you put your love and energy into it, and then serve it to your people. And there's a religious aspect in that, right? A metaphysical, spiritual aspect in that, to go help further and bolster your claim.
There's so many things I want to track back to. I love the idea of, so what we're lacking really is the education part here. And I love what you said, that maybe those people who think they are using the psychedelic substances to escape, maybe they keep going back to it because they found something in it. Why not, alcohol? I know so many people who go back to LSD a lot and stuff like that. I mean, why not something else? Obviously they finding something in it that continually calls them back. And maybe because of lack of education, lack of information, lack of like how to process this thing that they are experiencing, how to label it, how to not so much label, but how to integrate, how to understand it on a very deep level. That's what's lacking maybe. And I think education part is big here.
No, that mirrors my experience, because I was having, back before I went to rehab, I was working with mushrooms, and, I was an addict back then, and every experience, it was beautiful, but they told me, you're not going to be able to do anything with yourself until you kick this. That was the message every time, right? And it would bring me to tears, but it was a beautiful, loving thing that was being, relayed to me. But not until after I published during the course of publishing my first book about the research on psilocybin, is when I realized and discovered that people are getting in groups and consuming these like in a ritualistic fashion. And as a matter of fact, that took me to my first sacred ceremony. It was a Bufo ceremony in Texas. After that day, I'll never forget that when I got off the mat after taking my dose, Spirit spoke to me and said, these are your people, talking about the people of the church. Like, these are your people, help these people. And it just it completely blew my mind. And like within a week, people are contacting me out of the blue about this work. And so that's kind of how I got heavily involved. And now I've sat with groups all over the country. I'm planning to go to South America for the first time this year, to go sit in the jungle. And yeah, it just completely, again, I was kind of like those people. I mean, I just didn't really know the ins and outs of exactly what this was and was going on. But once I learned that these types of ceremonies and things are occurring, and I actually went and attended one, it completely reframed the way that I viewed, or maybe not completely, but it reframed the way that I view and approach and engage these sacraments for sure. And it's in my opinion, a more positive and healthy way than where I was a little bit before that.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Like Dr. James Fadiman says, there's no need to panic. There's no need to create anxiety. They are coming back. Whether we ignore them, the psychedelics are coming back really full on. And whether we choose to ignore and pretend they don't exist, makes no difference to what's unfolding. And he also said, I think something like, and it will get bad. It will go really, really bad. And from the ashes of what's happened, we will rise and we'll find amazing frameworks that could actually be applicable, practical. So from the ashes of, a lot of people say that, the way the Renaissance is going, the psychedelic Renaissance is happening right now with biotechs moving in to make money. And then there's the legal landscape. There is the science coming in as well with full blown, attention. So many things are happening, but there's so many people saying this is going to end up bad. But then, James Fadiman says, inevitably it's going to end up bad. But from the ashes of that, we're going to find true, authentic, practical ways of now finally, coming to a place of collaboration and working with them.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that people, again, there's like you say, there's a lot of players moving into particularly the pharmaceutical scientific realm, right? And I would be lying to say that there aren't players trying to move into the religious space too. People with money and funding. And again, how exactly that's going to end or where it's going to be, I don't know. But I agree with Dr. Fatima in that these substances will prevail. Again, in a historical context, it's, if we're judging by past, what's happened in the past, they absolutely will. And where we're at, at the end of that, I don't exactly know, but I do believe that the healthy, beneficial aspects of these substances will prevail, and that people will ultimately come to the inescapable conclusion that this is a necessary and integral part of us coming together and solving a lot of common problems that we have across the globe. And, for one particular being, how we treat Mother Nature. It's been proven in research that these substances increase nature relatedness, right? And I can't help but think that, these mushrooms come from the earth, and when we consume them, we feel more in tune with Mother Earth. It's just to me, it's more than just a coincidence, right, of these things. And I'm hoping that eventually one day we'll be able to solve some of these issues that plague us, through maybe not exclusively through the consumption of entheogen psychedelics, but that enough people will be influenced to actually start a movement towards that direction.
Yeah, I really love that. And to summarize everything I'm hearing from you, and key takeaways would be for me is to the whole experience is a sacred ritual of becoming better, understanding and learning about ourselves, and eventually tap into the self-agency that I feel like self-agency piece is the thing that's lacking in our this modern world that is created by the external factors. Once we kind of tap into that we are now we become the collaborators with the nature, with the people around us, with our communities, with our intentions, with that alignment is what makes us unshakable. And I think for me, psychedelic substances are there for us to find that equilibrium, find that connection, become a collaborator, and not perpetuate the separation.
Yeah.
I feel like this is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the most powerful insights I've had, and you'll hear me use the word entheogen, not that I have any particular problem with psychedelic. I do say it too, don't get me wrong, but I like entheogen because it's awakening the divine within. And I think that has a lot to do with self-agency, right? Because and just me personally, I toiled with this concept my whole life that there's some other, transcendent being in the sky that's like, God is separate from me. But just my experience and my views were going to message that, no, I am one with God, right? And like, when I came to that realization, well, then that's very powerful, right? That I feel like I'm a co-creator of this reality, of my reality and the reality, was very powerful, and that's why today I have that attitude. Like, I don't say the word I can't. I absolutely can, it's just all up here between my ears. And I think when people get to that place, that's very empowering. And I see people, once they reach it, man, they start doing things that people never thought were possible, and that's the beautiful thing about it. And it's that self-agency. It's all this process of awakening and almost like rebirth. A lot of people experience rebirthing, perinatal, aspects of these experiences that, they come out on the other side a new and better person.
Yeah, that's so great. And one of the things that I began implementing in the so for me, trauma informed is aspect of the psychedelic substance work is for me is at the heart of everything. And the reason I say that, because of observing that people can kind of be sidetracked if they are not really working with the material of the unconscious. That's where my passion comes into play with the trauma-informed aspect, because I feel like if the psychedelic substances are non-specific amplifiers, that means if we are not guided or in a safe container working with the material of the unconscious, then it's easy for us to sidetrack and go into this. There's another term that I'm going to share with you, psychedelic narcissism, or psychedelic bypassing, or the spiritual narcissism, or the spiritual bypassing, right?
So, no, I see it. And I, look, I'm not gonna lie. I see some people, not necessarily the people I've worked with per se, maybe a few, but that, have a lot more healing they need to do before they sit down and try to orchestrate other people engaging these substances, but it's like they have a few experiences and get kind of like the God complex. And now here we go. Now you got 30 people sitting in your circle, which just continues to feed that. And a lot of bypassing, a lot of ego. I'll share a story real quick with you about the trauma stuff. I was kidnapped at gunpoint and had my skull crushed in 2014 in a very violent thing. I had to pretty much stab my way out of the situation. And, through my time in rehab, which started a couple years later, to be honest with you, I wanted there was a woman who did it. I wanted her dead. You know what I mean? I just wanted her dead. And through working with the mushrooms, what they told me, they said, until you go and face her and hug her, like, you'll never get over this. And so I actually took a trip back home, 4 hours, and sat down and had a meal with this person and hugged this person. And I tell you, after that day, my life was completely different. But it was kind of this, I went in with the intention of trying to resolve this underlying trauma that I suspected was holding me back. And I got an answer that took me a while to integrate and accept. But once I did and kind of did as instructed, man, it completely changed, just even the universe around me responded in such a way. But you're right. It needs to kind of be pointed towards these things because, like you say, and it's common for people in ayahuasca experiences to like relive trauma that they had either forgot or were too young to remember, right? And it's one of those just breakthrough moments for people. It's so beautiful to see people. I've seen people at ayahuasca ceremonies come in so fearful and just broken down. And it's like the next day when they have a good positive experience, like, you can just look at them and see the difference, they're glowing. And so it's like this inner thing really affects the outer. And I see that time and time again.
Amazing stuff. Yeah. And in like I said, I always say I come from the therapeutic psychotherapy approach. So it's very easy for me to use the substances as a tool to deal with the unconscious material. It's like, for me, it's like no brainer. This is what you do. And once we work through the material of the unconscious and we bring resolution to these aspects, then they stop bleeding all over our decisions and our current reality and our relationships and the choices we make. So that's the power of bringing resolution to that unconscious material. That's why I always involve the trauma-informed aspect into it. And if you already know some of the big names in the space of trauma research. Some of my teachers, some of my mentors in the space, they always say, in order to heal or in order to bring resolution to that material of the unconscious, there has to be an event, a specific reactivation, like an inverse trauma happening, meaning internally going through and visiting the difficult emotions and the states of that experience in order to bring resolution. And in my experience, this is what the psychedelic medicines do.
Yeah, and it's not easy. Going and revisiting those things, like you say, is a whole traumatic event in and of itself, but with the opposite effect, right? With the resolution of these things. And for instance, with ayahuasca, I venture to say there's really no other use for ayahuasca other than to go deep and to face these things, right? And people have beautiful experiences on it, but I guarantee you the first handful of times you're going to be going deep and you're going to see some very uncomfortable things and experience them again. But, as my grandma would say, the proof is in the pudding. Once you see people working through that, again, it's not just internally, it's the universe around them responds to them differently and in a more favorable manner. Because people go around carrying this subconscious baggage, and many people aren't even aware of it. They've either experienced something or been programmed in such a way that it just, again, bleeds through their entire life. And then they get this fresh perspective, that this doesn't have to weigh me down. This is, defeatable. We can win. And so I'm sure as a therapist, you seeing these kind of outcomes is probably what keeps you coming back every day.
Yeah, exactly. I call this process of working with the material and bring resolution is the ultimate liberation. Mm-hmm. It truly is the ultimate liberation.
It is.
Yeah, and then we stop worrying about and being stuck in that space, so that now you said, your experiences are always very practical, futuristic, like how to, live in an authentic way. I think this is beautiful. I think once we do that, have that self-agency, and I want to bring the quickly tie into the community aspect of this. Mm-hmm. That's why we had elders. There's a concept of elders in indigenous, communities, that there's a reason why, That's why you don't expect a 20-year-old ayahuasca shaman serving ayahuasca, because, they had to go through some life experience in order to come out the other end and carry some wisdom to hold space. And also facilitate a healing space. So I was saying that in the work that we do now, I feel like we need to bring more of that community aspect, but more congruently, because we don't want to be rescuers anymore. In the spiritual circles, we see a lot of people rescuing each other and always inclined to be positive and inclined to give positive feedback. But in my work, we don't see that as constructive. We see that as holding people back. Not to be rude. I'm not saying you've got to be rude, but I think the accountability aspect of it in the community circles is so important.
So when I was in the rehab facility, we used to have these things called confrontational encounter groups, where you would notice a behavior in someone, and you would literally sit across from them in a chair and let them know about it, right? And then once it was done, they'd be like, okay, group, who agrees with this? And it's just like a way to hold people accountable, because a lot of people go and have these behaviors, thought patterns, all this, and just aren't even aware of it, right? But once they're told, and again, in a respectful manner, then they can start to address it, right? But if everything they ever hear is just positive feedback, oh, you're great, oh, all this, nothing ever gets done that way. And, I go to AA meetings all the time, right? And I work with sponsees, and I tell them, look, I'm not a perfect person either. If you see me behaving in a certain way, let me know, right? Because like I said earlier, I remain teachable. I'm far from perfect. I work on myself every day. And I appreciate when people say, look, you're being not a good person right now, it's absolutely essential. And, there's a lot of people in this world that have just only grown up with nothing but, oh, you're great. Oh, this is great, and not realizing that we all have a shadow, right? We all have a shadow. And until we identify it and embrace it, it's going to keep plaguing our life over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. And with that self-agency, with the liberation, I always find that there is has to emerge a radical acceptance of. I think I also believe that once we deal with the unconscious material, then we stop chasing the mystical. One of my favorite stories, I tell it all the time. Probably listeners heard me saying this again, like before. So there was this Christian nun lived in a monastic life, and they interviewed her when she decided to retire, and she wanted to go back home and have a normal life, whatever that normal life that we say here in the modern world. And they said, like, we want to find out. They wanted to interview her, and they were so eager to find out. So what did you do in your 40 years of life? Did you speak to the angels, the God, and the spirits and the ghosts, and like, tell us? And she paused for a long time, and she answered, I've learned two things: how to eat and how to sleep. I think once we really know who we are, we stop chasing. That's why I always bring the spiritual bypassing into the conversations. We stop seeking anything outside of us. We are so content here. And we have this radical acceptance of we are in this physical dimension in human body. It's a finite one time maybe, because we don't even know the reincarnation philosophy, because concept, let's say, is it true? Is it not true? Is it? Yes, it may be, but let's come back to here now and enjoy what we have.
It's all the great mystery, you know what I mean? And what I tell people is this, is, because I deal with a lot of religious practitioners, and me personally, it's like this. Whatever you believe, make it whatever makes you feel comfortable in the here and now and present, right? Whatever that may be convicted enough, whether there is an afterlife, whether or not, that you feel comfortable and present right here. Because I've seen people, and my brother-in-law's mother, unfortunately, recently passed away from cancer. And, despite going to church every Sunday, you could tell as she got nearer to death that these weren't things that she had really thought of, to the point of being comfortable and convicted, and approached that time in a very anxious and fearful way, unfortunately, And so what that taught me was that, come to terms with me, whatever I believe on those things, to just be comfortable in the here and now. And like you say, ultimately, everything that I need and the answers that I seek are really inside of me, right? Sometimes we need assistance with the community, with these substances, to help bring that about, to come to those realizations. But ultimately, it's all right here. If we quiet our mind, our ego enough, like, we can really get in tune with our true self. And that's where, that peace and love and kindness and in the present moment occurs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I see that the real work ultimately is about, confronting our own mortality. Knowing that we're finite beings, despite being so powerful and godlike. And my favorite term?
What's that?
That we are fragile gods.
That's right.
Fragile gods. Ultimately, we will leave this body. Ultimately, we don't know what's beyond here. No one has ever gone. The deepest information we have, or the most clear information we have, is from the near-death experiences. Through people, and they only got to a point, and there was, again, nothing beyond they could tell us. So I always like to bring ourselves back here, grounded in being human, in radical acceptance, and living every day knowing that one day we won't be here anymore, and one day we'll have to travel to the next dimensions, and nobody knows. No one's been there to come and tell us. So, yes, it's hard to have that confrontation of our mortality and being human sometimes. Yes, I fully understand the need to escape, because sometimes the pain is too much in this body. But with the help of community, with people like you doing all the work that you're doing, creating, and because with your work, hopefully we'll have more of these circles where people can do authentic work, hopefully, and lead by example, so that everybody can just learn from each other and be better for themselves.
One thing that I've learned, that and I think this is innately in everybody, the sense that serving other people, helping another person. I don't know what that does for me in the afterlife, or if there is one, but something internally tells me that this is the right thing to do, to love. Things like that give me a sense of that's what I need to be doing in this life, right? And again, that all comes from in here. I get that sense from here. And so that's kind of what I let guide me through this life. And hopefully I'm correct. Hopefully whatever occurs beyond this, the love and the support and that I give to others in this life means something there,
And that's it. As simple as beautiful and simple as that. Honestly, this is all there is to it. Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for such
thank you. This
was a
great talk. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Yeah, and just let people know my book is up for free donation on EntheoConnect.com. Feel free to give whatever energy exchange you feel compelled to give. Obviously, the print version is going to be on Amazon. I will say that I was able to secure a pretty cool book cover art from a guy named Jim Figura, who painted this picture of kind of reflecting the stoned ape theory, which really fit into the second chapter of my book. And so I know a lot of people are probably going to want it, and he's also got a great art store to check out. But for ebook purposes, don't feel compelled to go buy it on Amazon. Feel free to go to EntheoConnect, get it for free if you like, or just whatever energy exchange you feel fair. I'm good with either way.
Thank you so much for that offer. And yes, we will have your links in the show notes. And also, before I let you go, you have this website you're building, EntheoConnect. What stage is it at now? And also tell us what it is.
Yeah, so Entheo, and again, it's kind of this dynamic thing, right? So I originally developed EntheoConnect about probably a little bit over a year ago. And when we first published it, there was a lot of problems with it. So I had to switch developers. At the time, I was working a full-time job doing this church work, writing these books. And so it kind of got put on the back burner for a while. But now I've quit my day job, working fully in this space. So what we envision for EntheoConnect is going to be more or less like a listing service and a community forum where people can find out about these different churches and other organizations serving these substances, along with other kinds of practitioners, Reiki, combo, all that other stuff that goes, ancillary to these things. It's going to be a listing service, and I hope one day to eventually have a marketplace on there. So we're just going to take it, we hope to have it back up here in the next 60 days and start listings and stuff like that. But there is an email list to register for, which I'm now sending out biweekly emails for, and I will keep everybody up to date as the situation progresses.
Amazing. Sounds like a sacred directory for healing arts modalities.
We try to be. I will say that, me and my team, we definitely hold these substances as sacred, and we're going to do our best to make sure that only qualified practitioners come onto the site, but we will have community input. So that way we can kind of let the community gauge too who deserves to be on there and who doesn't. And and just real quick, and I know you mentioned this earlier, kind of the dark side of this is that unfortunately there are people who are either unqualified or have malicious intentions in serving medicine. And the best that we can do is just as a community get together and kind of weed them out. I don't think these people are going to stop all the progress that's been done, but ultimately I think the community kind of coming together and deciding who's worthy of serving medicine or holding ceremony or not is going to be super important. And so I'm hoping EntheoConnect will help kind of play that function.
I love that, screening through the community. Sounds all positive. Great.
Try to keep it that way.
Well, keep going, because we need a lot of people like you who understand the dark side of the psychedelic substances, and also who understands the legal and the history. All encompassing information that you carry is very, very precious, and thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I've put, I can say this, I've put a lot of love and energy and work into everything I do in this space. It's, for me, my higher calling. I was led to this point, and I just keep letting the universe show me and reveal me more as I go. And it's absolutely beautiful. And I love everybody. Thank y'all. If we keep supporting one another, we're going to make it to the end zone, right? We just need to come together and support one another as a community worldwide. And in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll have really made some progress.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. And thank you for continually reinforcing the community aspect, because that's where my passion is. Absolutely. I'm a huge believer in healing out loud together in community-centric groups, authentically.
I agree.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us on the second episode. Thank you, everybody. If you made it this far, really appreciate you. Check out the first episode. We'll link it down below as well. We did one more episode a while ago, and this is our second conversation. Every time we have these conversations, there's so much progress. It's unbelievable. and hope to be following your projects and maybe have you again very soon. Yeah, we need to do this regularly. These talks are so important.
We will, as things update materially on my end, I'll let you know. And if it's time, we'll sit down and do another one.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate you. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Susan.
All the best. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And if you want to say maybe last sort of whatever you want to share with our listeners before we say bye.
Yeah, no, thank you all for listening in. It's an honor to be here today. Like, we'll link my information. And if you have any question, comments, concerns, or just want to connect, feel free to reach out. I'd really take pleasure in connecting with people all over the world. That's been one of the major blessings of doing this work, is it's a worldwide thing. And I think as we come together more globally, the shift will keep occurring at a faster rate.
Also, they can reach out to you if they're in the US and they're planning on having their own entheogenic church, right? Would you be able to help people, assisting them into?
Yeah, they can just get a hold of me, george.lake@EntheoConnect.com. Just shoot me an email and we'll try to narrow down a time to discuss.
Great, because I know it's valid in US right now, but obviously Europe and other countries are different. But yeah, it's a great opportunity to consider that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you guys on the next one. Bye for now. Much love.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining us. Psychedelic Conversations podcast is designed to educate, inform, and expand awareness. For more information, please head over to psychedelicconversations.com. You can also share with your friends or leave a review so that we can reach more people. You can also join us in our private Facebook group to keep the conversation going. This show is for information purposes only, and it is not intended to provide mental health or medical advice. Thanks for listening.